I must begin this evening with a verse from Jeremiah, which echoes in my head since that fateful day, June 12th, I believe, Thursday night, in which the three boys were abducted. Kol barama nishma, nehi bechi tamrurim, Rachel mevaka al banea, me'ana le'inachem ki eineno. A high voice was heard, a bitter voice, filled with lamentations and sadness. And there we saw the voice of Rachel that refuses to console herself, for her son is no more. Rachelle Fraenkel is to all of us that Rachel. It wasn't just the matriarch Rachel Imenu, but it's undoubtedly the Rachel that you see in front of your eyes tonight, who became the voice of our nation, crying that bitter cry that Jeremiah so eloquently speaks about, and refuses to be consoled because her child is no more. But I must tell you, Racheli, that as you saw in this video and beyond, your child is very much here. Al banea ki hu kan. There is no doubt that Naftali, along with Gilad and along with Eyal, are here tonight, very present in this room. There is no doubt that they are present through you and through that wonderful model that you have become for our nation. And I must say that I hope that just as we are with you, listening to your cry, I hope that once and for all God too will listen to that cry that has been felt in every atom of our nation from that day until this very day, so that you are finally consoled and brought true comfort. To begin this interview, which I'm truly honored to have here with a hero of our nation, a heroine of our nation.
Can I just say,
yes, please.
That movie was just unbelievable. It's heartwarming is saying so little. The fact that this story affected people on a personal level. It was amazing for us during the 18 days of the search and during the mourning that people connected and they were involved. But the fact that people live it on and incorporated things into their life, it's amazing to me. I was so moved. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to say, you evoke in me, and this is about you speaking tonight, not about me speaking, but you evoke in me a story of Rabbi Shimon Hyman, who was one of the great Roshei Yeshiva, heads of yeshivas in the 1930s in New York, the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Vadat. And one day he came to his yeshiva, to his school, to lecture on a Shabbat afternoon, as he did each and every Shabbat. But that Shabbat was particularly snowy, and only 4 people showed up instead of the hundreds that he had there. And he spoke his lecture as if hundreds of people filled the room with great enthusiasm and cries. At one point, in the middle of the lecture, one of the students stands from his seat and he says, "Rabbi, can't you see there's only a few of us here? Aren't hundreds of us like you used to? You can lower your voice. You don't have to shout." The rabbi says, "What? There's only a few of you? I see hundreds of you. In fact, I see thousands of you." Students thought the rabbi went crazy. He said, "No, look, count. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rabbi says, "No, you don't understand. I see you, I see your children, I see your children's children, I see your students, I see your students. There's thousands of you." So Naftali, as we said, is forever present, because through these actions is forever here. There's not one Naftali now, there's hundreds of Naftalis, and thousands of them. Not just in our community, but fortunately and luckily for the nation of Israel across the world. I'd like to ask you, just to begin this interview, maybe you can take us through the 3 weeks from the moment on Thursday night you heard that there must have been an abduction, until, if you can, the Shiva for the boys.
So Naftali was an 11th grader, and he was on the last day of school. They actually had a field trip for the last days of school. He was planning to get back to school to take some matriculation exams, but otherwise he was done. And he texted us. He always came home on Friday morning, and he texted us that he's back from the trip, so he'll be back Thursday night. It took us a while to see the message, and we at some point sent back, about an hour later, sent back a message, "Oh, great." And we later, after everything unfolded, we later learned that we answered him about 2 minutes after it was all over. He's a big, responsible boy, so we had an early night. We went to sleep, and we were woken up at 3:30 by policemen that came to our home. Apparently, his friend Gilad was in touch with his parents, and at some point they lost contact, and he didn't show up at home. So they started making phone calls, and they found out that Naftali and Gilad left the school together. And ever since, they were, going to the police, whatever. They got to us eventually. For a second there, I thought it's all about going up and seeing them safely in their beds. And when Naftali was not in bed, then I went downstairs. I couldn't see him anywhere. I rang his phone. He didn't answer. We knew we were deep in trouble because these were very, very responsible kids, and they don't just disappear. So I was thinking about traffic accident, whatever, and within 2 hours, we already got the last location of their cell phones in the Hebron area, which is the exact opposite direction to where they were headed. They came from Kfar Etzion, it's south of Jerusalem, and we live in the center of Israel, between Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim. It took just a few hours for the intelligence to do their work, and the Shabak and the Modi'in, and we knew within hours everything there is to know about who took them, and a lot of details except where they're being kept. There were a lot of signs to the effect that they were taken hostage to be kept alive. We now know there were over 20 people involved in that Hamas local Hebron area that were planning this, but there were 3 directly involved. 2 were 3 months later killed in a battle in Hebron, and 1 was convicted in a Israeli court just about a week ago. And he says how he was waiting for a sign to come and feed the hostages, and the first night it didn't come. Turns out that they went for the rounds, but they didn't find proper victims. And then the next night he waited again, and they didn't come to tell him to come feed the hostages, and later they came to ask him to help bury them. They said that the boys resisted. I don't know what the truth is. We never knew this. We knew that there were a lot of signs that they could be alive. Everybody was very honest with us. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, the Shabak head, the Shin Bet. They said we had this tape of this amazing phone call, and we knew there were shots in the gun in the tape. We didn't know if it was to scare them, or maybe they killed 2 and kept 1, maybe they're wounded, maybe they're all dead. All options were open, and everybody was working under the assumption that they could be alive. And the truth is, if they wouldn't have been searching for them that way, they wouldn't have been found. So during those 18 days, there were extremely intensive days.
How did you sleep? How did you sleep during those 3 weeks?
I remember feeling very anxious, but very focused. I felt it all go to the bottom of my, like a place in my body where it all, the anxiety went, but the rest of me was very much focused. We were trying to do what we can do to help save our son. So the government and the army and, everybody was turning the world upside down, and they were doing everything they could. But we realized that pretty soon there'll be some international pressure to get the pressure off the Hebron population, and we wanted to buy time for the government. So that's why I got to speak in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and that's why we were talking to people and speaking to media and trying to gain legitimacy to the story. So we have the time to find the boys. It was extremely intensive. I never experienced Shabbat the way I experienced it then, because we live in a community that shuts down on Shabbat. And across the street, right, like all around our house, we had about 40 photographers and journalists. It became like the Big Brother's home. And when Shabbat came, the gates closed, and the photographers were very happy to go home. And it was all about being with the family and being with the community and relaxing. And over the days, we realized there was something going on. Within a day or two, we started understanding that this is not our own private community thing. People from all over the state of Israel started coming, all kinds of people, right-wing, left-wing, religious, not religious, ultra-Orthodox, Jews, non-Jews, Druze, Bedouins, Christians, people from all over. And slowly we began to understand that the Jews in the diaspora are so involved. And you saw me saying there, I spoke to Jews from Kathmandu and Cape Town, and truly people from all over the world. And I remember at some point asking my brother-in-law, he's a very down-to-earth, non-mystical, rational person. I said, give me a reality check. Is something really going on, or is this just, a suffering mother trying to give meaning to her suffering? And he said, he was involved too, but he said, there's something going on. People are coming together like they never did. So those were the days.
How did, a personal question if you don't mind, but how did Naftali's siblings, especially the younger ones, because I understand he has one older brother, but how did they deal with the tragedy?
Naftali is our second boy. He has a brother that's 2 years older, also studied for 4 years in Makor Chaim. On Friday morning, we sent the kids to school. We didn't tell them anything. And within a couple of hours, I realized that the names are circulating and people are finding out. And I called my son in yeshiva. He should consider coming home for Shabbat. And I went to my girls' school. And they were in the middle of some kind of celebration. And they were reluctant to come with me. So I stayed there watching that nobody's approaching them, that nobody should speak to them before I do. And there were some other parents there, and later I learned that they already knew, and for them it was totally surreal to see me there standing waiting for my girls. And then we spoke to each one in their own language. I told my 6-year-old girl, Nama, that Naftali got lost and the whole world is looking for them. So she burst out in tears and she said, we're not going to find him just like our dog got lost and we never found him again. So, they speak, they take it on their own, probably the hardest thing I ever did was when they were found was taking them each individually and breaking the news to them. But before that, over the days, we were very optimistic. We were joking around about when Naftali comes, he'll probably be, it's hilarious what's going on here. But we were also trying to be very clear about, we would pray and then I'd end it with, V'Hashem hayashar be'enav yaseh, and God does what he finds fitting. And I tried to convey to them that, we're doing our best, we're optimistic, but nobody promised us anything. And Baruch Hashem, they're dealing with it. I mean, you never know on the long run what's going to be. Right. But I'll give you an example. My youngest children, Shlomo is 4, Noga is Nama is 6, and Noga is 10. So over 6 months ago, they started saying on Kriyat Shema Lamita, they say these psukim, these verses that they're called verses of shmira, of protection. So they say, B'Shem Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Mimini Michael, Mismoli Gavriel, Milfanai Uriel, Me'achorai Rafael, Naftali Mistakel, U'me'al Roshi Shchinat El. So they put Naftali up with the angels, with the Uriel, Gabriel, and Naftali is looking at us. And then Shlomo got annoyed. He said, "Oh, but we said Naftali yesterday." So Noga said, "But we repeat that verse 3 times. So we say one for Eyal, one for Gilad, and one for Naftali." And originally I thought it's just a cute story. But over time, I realized it has healing power. And, they can be 80, Bezrat Hashem, and still saying the verses like this because they'll find a place for the boys in their life.
Right. So I want to speak to you about how you keep that amazing smile on all the time. I spent the day with Racheli, and the optimism and the happiness that simply radiates through her is majestic, to say the least. But how do you do it? This is a question that many, I'm sure, have. How do you do it?
Over the last few months, we're new at this business of dealing with loss. I'm sure, even in this room, there are people that have dealt with each their own, and over time, and we're like 8 months old in this, so it's not even a toddler, okay? So I don't have any big wisdom. I have only my own experience. We've met over time many bereaved families. When you sit Shiva, people come over to tell you their story because they want to tell you there's life after that. And by the end of the day, you say, "Oh, what people go through here," it accumulates. And I've met the families where you're not allowed to cry because we're strong. And I've met the families where you're not allowed to laugh because we've suffered such loss. And they're always the ones that come over to you and say, "We put a smile on our face for the kids, for the grandchildren, because life goes on, but you and I know it's all a mask." And the truth is they're very brave for putting on the mask. It's a choice. But you have to choose what suits you, and thank God my husband and myself are on the same page with this, and I don't want to live with a mask on my face. So I cry when I cry, and I laugh when I laugh, and I try to experience the whole spectrum of life experiences. And we have, I think it's a variation I made on a Parker Palmer saying, I can feel pain, I don't have to become my pain. I can feel sadness, I don't have to become my sadness. And in my inner landscape, there are so many other colors and a variety of strength. It would be such ingratitude not to realize the rest of the blessing I have in my life. When this story began, my husband and myself were really hoping for the best, but we said, even if the worst happens, we are blessed people. There's so much blessing in our life, and we'll keep on living with that.
Do you bottle that? Can we buy it somewhere?
My daughter Naama said, I'm sorry, I speak a lot about my kids. They don't know that. That's okay.
And Racheli is blessed, if I may say, with 7 children. Yes. From the age of 19 to the age of 4 years old.
Yeah, Naftali is our second.
Naftali was the second. And she's here with us, even though she has a 4-year-old. I know what that's like. She has a 4-year-old at home.
But my husband knows what it's like.
Don't say that to my wife. You didn't hear that, right, Esther? Okay.
So let me tell you.
Yeah,
as a parent, we now we're 3 families here. In this particular story, even though through the summer there were another 72 civilians and soldiers killed, and we've had terror attacks since, and it feels weird that we're getting so much exposure. But each parent, when you ask them about the loss, they have this time that's extremely difficult. Like Ophir, the father of Gilad, speaks about Birkat Kohanim. In Israel, in America, it happens 3 times a year. And in Israel, people do Birkat Kohanim all the time. And he speaks about when he wraps himself with a talit, and the absence of Gilad there is heartbreaking. And for us, it's when we sing Zmirot on Shabbat on the Shabbos table. Naftali was very musical, and he sang in a choir, and he used to harmonize. So, and one of those Shabbatot, we were having a difficult moment, and my 10-year-old girl, Noga, she ran to the couch, and she turned to me, and I saw in her eyes that she was asking permission to cry. And I went over to her and I said, you know, Noga, it's fine. It's beseder gamur to cry, and it's beseder gamur to be happy. And I feel sometimes we need permission for that. Naama is 6, she says, Ima, is it true that you still put on your makeup only when you get to work so you can cry on the way? And for me, that was very, I was happy she opened it up with me. I didn't want it to feel it's like business as usual. So I said, you know, Nama, it's not like every day, the whole day, I cry the whole way, but I reserve the right to cry. So truly, I don't know, everybody has their own way of dealing with things,
right.
but for us, it's trying to be authentic.
Okay, so I did not say, but many of these questions were compiled by you, so I thank you very much for forwarding them. And one question that stood out is if there was one thing, and you don't have to answer, but if there was one thing you wish you could have done with Naftali, but tragically you didn't have the chance to do, what is that thing? And the question was asked really because maybe we can do it to our children in that way, pay homage to you and to Naftali.
I truly don't know. I'm in very close contact with Naftali's friend. He learned in a wonderful school and he has a bunch of wonderful friends. They lost 2 dear friends at 16. And it was a lot for them to handle, and the connection with them is great. So I actually got this as a present from a mother of a former student of mine that was killed in a car accident, and she said, you know, you should really stay in contact with their friends. It's like reviving them, and I know for some people it's difficult. So I'd love to, you know, come to their graduation if God will give me the strength to do that, and dance at their weddings, and these are all the things I didn't get to do with Naftali,
right.
But.
Oh, that's a good enough answer.
I'll tell you what. Somebody asked me, did you change as a parent? And I'm not sure. On the one hand, there are all these things that I wish I had spoken to him about. On the other hand, when you have a teenager, you sometimes step back to give them their own space, and that's, you know, he was 16. He was just at that stage. Everything was going to happen.
Right.
But you know, when things happen, you go home, you hug your children harder, and
right. Very nice. So I want to transition a little to maybe more philosophical questions. But has this tragedy affected your personal faith and belief in God? And if it has, how? If it has bettered it, then what contributed to that renewal, if we may say?
It's interesting because people had started telling us that they heard us speak faith, speak emunah. And for me, it was very strange because I felt like I didn't say a word about emunah and about faith. And well, I took a note of that fact because as a teacher and as a parent, it's good to remember that it's not the things that you say that come across. Important messages probably come other ways. For some people, faith is a stable rock in their life that never changes. For me, it was always a dynamic experience. Sometimes feeling very close, sometimes feeling more distant. Sometimes, you know, I remember the times where I'd walk out, look at a starry sky, and say, "Seriously, really? Is this?" You know, so maybe I shouldn't be talking like this. So I've been all these places. There's something about being in a very vulnerable place, in a very, very fragile state, where what you wish most is totally out of your control, that teaches you, I don't know, in a way, the humility that really consists of a real shi'ur be'emunah, a lesson in faith. During the funeral, there were 3 parts. The last part was there were 100,000 people there, and the prime minister, and it was like a national event. And before that, we came from 3 different communities, and we had a communal event. And before that, my husband and myself and one of my children that chose to come in had a few minutes alone in the room with Naftali. And I remember thinking how tall he was, even though he didn't finish growing. And I remember the sense of, this is my son's body, not my son. So I know we speak about the soul and, I don't know how you call it, guf and nefesh.
Yeah, body and soul.
Body and soul.
Yeah.
But it was so much in my face that it's something I experienced. Beyond that, I feel we live in quite a pampered generation or century. We feel that through technology and medicine and all the developments, we'll all live until 120 and everything will be wonderful. And, it's not exactly that way. But I don't feel that Hashem, that God owes me anything, and nobody promised me a rose garden. So somehow, I know psychologically it doesn't work like that, but rationally, I don't understand what changed. If I had faith before, I have faith now.
That's remarkable. It is. It's remarkable. So, if I may switch to maybe a different topic, maybe a nationalistic topic. So, the discovery of the bodies, obviously, many say, led to the war in Gaza thereafter. And but having faced Jewish hatred firsthand in such a brutal way. So we know that the government of Israel does what it needs to do. The army does what it needs to do. But what does the simple Jew facing Jewish hatred in the diaspora, in the streets of Paris, for example, need to do? What would be your message to that Jew? Could be one of us here in this room. How to face Jewish hatred, whether through Facebook or in the streets, in the most positive way.
I'll start by a statement that the boys, sometimes I walk in the street in Israel and people would say, Geveret, הילדים שלכם צדיקים, הם הצילו את עם ישראל. They'd say, oh, these boys are righteous boys because the terror tunnels were discovered because of them and we were saved some mega terror attack. And the truth is, I never presume to know how things work in this world, or namely how God runs the world. So I don't even say the sentence that the tunnels were discovered because of the boys. I don't know. There are other things that I did feel, like the experience of looking for the boys for 18 days brought us together in a way that I don't know if we could have faced such a difficult war with missiles and casualties without that period, because a society can't face that when they're all torn apart. And so that I could attribute to that. But it's interesting. It is one narrative. It started with the boys, and
right.
And you're talking anti-Semitism. I'm no expert on any of these things. I'm Naftali's mother here.
Right, but
I'll tell you
what.
My parents made Aliyah in the way before I was born, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't thank them for having me grow up in Israel and raise my children in Israel. And I don't know if I would have the strength that it would take, if I would have what it takes to pick myself up and do it today. Supposedly, we paid the ultimate price this summer for their decision, but I feel it even more, that I was privileged to be born in the right part. So one thing, you see the Jews of France experiencing anti-Semitism, and some pick themselves up and decide it's time to make Aliyah. But so I'm very biased about that. But anti-Semitism we see it all over. We see a serious problem with the radical parts of Islam all over. And I must mention, I've had the most wonderful interactions with non-Jews during the period of the kidnapping and after. it was like decent people around the world, Christians, Muslims, even Palestinians from Gush Etzion area, the ones that were horrified by this story, came through and offered, support and condolences. And so I don't have the big answers, but I do hear you say, it was the first time I heard that used, that the terrorists said, "Put your head down." They say with a very thick Arabic accent, they say, "Lorid et harosh," and you say our reaction is to pick up our head high, and that's I'm all for that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I want to go back. Many of us are parents, and many of us are mothers like you. Many of you, should say us, are mothers like you. If you had one message.
I love the way you formulate your questions. Yeah, one message.
Now, one message condenses everything into one little line, but if possible, one message to share with all parents in the world. What would be that message?
I know we cherish every minute we have with our children. It's a treasure. It's the biggest blessing. I don't know what to say beyond that. I think there's something to be said not only about parenting, but about dealing with adversity. When we were, from the first Friday after noontime, there was an IDF team that showed up at our home, and they represented the collective wisdom of the state of Israel. Unfortunately, we've gone through these things, and the people that came to us, they've been in Gilad Shalit and Regev and Goldwasser, and you name it, they were there. And there was a team stationed in each one of the families' houses, and it was very interesting because their philosophy was they babysat us 24/7, but they weren't allowed to invade our family, unit. So they were posted in our garden, and they were there for us all the time. And at some point, you mentioned the call Gilad very bravely made, and there was a gag order over that call. And at some point in time, they were afraid that the call will be published, whatever, and that we'll hear it in a non-controlled environment. So they gave us a choice to listen to the call, and this is like a week after the boys were kidnapped. I chose to listen to the tape, but before that, I didn't know what I'm going to hear, and I knew that if throughout these days I was, I was controlling my mind where it goes and not to dwell on the dark places. I didn't know how it will affect me. So I approached one of the people from the IDF team, and I asked him to prepare me to listening to that call. And he said, "Okay, Racheli, what are you afraid of?" And I said, "I don't know. I might fall apart." And he said, "Okay, so you'll fall apart. And then what?" And I thought for a second, and I said, "Well, I guess then I'll collect myself and I'll get up." And those were such simple words, but for me, they were so profound, because I'll add it to another story. There's a mother, Chagit Rein, she's a mother of Bnaya Rein, Hashem Yikom Damo. He's a soldier that was killed in Lebanon a few years ago. And she called us a few days before the high holidays, before Rosh Hashanah, and she said, sometimes you should know, sometimes the fear of the coming holiday is much worse, the idea of being for the first time without your child in the holiday is much worse than the experience itself. So you should just know that it's going to be okay. And putting the things together, I tell myself, you don't have to be in the most dramatic, surreal situation like we were in order for, just to tell yourself, sometimes the fear of the worst thing happening is worse than the thing itself. And even if the worst thing in the world happens, and unfortunately it did happen to us, and even if you fall apart, and it's okay, sometimes you deserve to fall apart, you'll find it within you to pick yourself up and to get up. So
You know, I'm amazed. That's probably heavenly sent. But last year's Gala at CBT, we had my dear mentor, Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz, a world scholar, whom you know very well, and who we know very well. That's basically our connection, because I went to the yeshiva of Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz, where Naftali also went. But he said just that. He said the most important question of life is ve'azma. And then what? You get bar mitzvah, but then what? You get married, and then what? That's the big question of life. So maybe I'll conclude with this, and then maybe we'll open it up for questions and answers. So what is the then what for you? You have become really such a shining light for our nation. You have become this leader, this role model to thousands upon thousands of Jews across the world and beyond. We have embraced you. I hope you've embraced us. But what's the next step for you? Israeli politics? Is it... what's the next step?
You're right. But as they say, you shouldn't be asking lama, you should ask lima. You know, not why did this happen, but what for? What are you going to do with it now? Well, no, I'm not going into politics. It's just not my talent.
Even I'm sure you've received many calls during the election season.
Just
Yeah.
whatever.
See, she's extremely humble.
Yeah.
I'm quite amazed, and I think humility...
See, politics don't suit me.
That's right. I think humility and happiness have a deep connection. I have to say, I asked Rachelle, and then you, but I asked before, during the cocktail hour, do you want to sit down behind a desk, have people come to you instead of exhausting yourself? She said, no, what am I, a rebel or something? But with all your humility, and then what?
First of all, I choose to view this as a very temporary state. There's this point of in time where we got, you know, for the worse and for the better, there's a lot of exposure. And we work at, in Hebrew we say, lotzi matok mi'az, to take the sweet out of the bitter. And there was plenty of bitter, but thank God there's so much sweet, and there's so much goodness that is coming out of like the thousand. It's amazing. And so in this, you know, temporary phase, I take the opportunity to thank people for opening their hearts and their homes and putting the magnets of our children on their refrigerator and the names in the sidurim and just living this with us. And I'm very inclined to try to see what we can do to continue the unity. The achdut sounds like a cliche, unity, but it's true. And I think if some of the spirit of this summer could be preserved and you know moved on, it would be the best commemoration for our boys. And beyond that, I'll go back to teaching Torah. That's what I do. I teach Talmud and Halacha, and I serve as a Yoetzet Halacha, and the world of women learning Torah is where I feel comfortable, so that's what I hope to continue doing.
Well, you have a job opening in Congregation Beth Tefillah. And Rachelle, with all her humility, she is one of the pioneers in Torah scholarship for women.
Well, I'm not a pioneer. I actually enjoyed the fruit of the pioneers, but I must tell you...
I told you, you're humble.
You have the warmest, most... I'm so impressed by this community. You're just in the wrong continent.
Okay. We offered you a job opening. You didn't offer us anything. I don't know.
No.
Okay, but we'll open it up to questions in the crowd. We have just a few minutes. And then I'd like to conclude this evening by asking our CBT president to come and share a few words. But first, a few questions. Anyone?
Yeah.
I can't. Ah, Dr. Melmed, please.
Rachel, I told you that my mother and friends listen to you every week, and there's so much love here.
Thank you.
What do you think you're offering them that the spiritual establishment of Israel isn't?
Well, I don't know what the spiritual establishment is or isn't.
Maybe repeat the question
yeah,
for everyone.
the question was, Actually, he mentioned that there's a program I participate in and has a very low rating, but is watched by people. It's part of a project that started in Israel just a few weeks ago. It's called 929. It's the number of chapters in the Bible. And people, hopefully, around the world will start learning 5 chapters of Tanakh a week. And I have conversations with people on those weekly Tanakh portions. It's not the Sedra, it's a different kind of thing. And it connects a lot to the idea that the Jewish tradition and the Bible belongs to all of us. And I don't know how it is here, but in Israel, if you identify as secular, you kind of leave the job to the rabbis. You know, so I have to move away from Tanakh. And the truth is, Ben Gurion was the biggest Tanakh person, and his vision was of a state of Jews, secular Jews, that live a biblical life. I mean, in the light of the Bible. So for me, opening this Tanakh learning is connecting with different kinds of Jews, with their points of view, and with their connection to their own Jewish identity, and doing, you know, in the spirit of unity, sharing what we share together, and you know, just recognizing that it's yours just like it is mine, and you know, nobody should give up the treasures of their culture and their religion. So.
Wow.
Yeah, there.
Eddie, go for it. Eddie.
Yeah. Oh,
Can't see.
sorry. He was asking how we feel about the people that abducted the boys, and are we, you know, between hatred and forgiveness. So I'll start out by saying I don't want to raise my children on hate. It eats you from within. It's not the way I want to raise them. So when we talk at home, I try to differentiate between terrorists and Hamas and these evil people, and Arabs and Muslims, and that are, some of them are, you know, very nice, kind people. And I try for hatred not to be a cornerstone of our home. It doesn't belong there. The day after our boy's funeral, there was a horrendous murder that took place in Jerusalem. We were trying to, you know, we didn't believe Jews had anything to do with it, but it turned out to be a crime of hate. And we spoke out very harshly against that. We were horrified by that. We tried to reach out to Muhammad Abu Khadir's family. So that being said, Rav Steinzal says, in davening we say, Oseh shalom uvoreh et hakol, that you create peace and you create everything. But the truth is that that's just politically correct for the original Isaiah verse that says, Oseh shalom uvoreh ra. He creates peace and he creates evil. So there is evil in the world, and when there is evil, you have to name it, and not be shy from naming evil when you face it. And we've been facing throughout, you know, worldwide, some true evil. And I think we have to deal with that. We have to face it. We have to admit it's there. On the morning, Erev Rosh Hashanah, I got a phone call from the Shabbat, from the Shin Bet. They said there was a battle in Hebron, and after 3 months of chasing them, the 2 murderers were killed in a battle in Hebron. And at first, I didn't feel anything. And the next thing I thought about how I knew that they had 2 automatic weapons and 2 pistols, and that they were looking to leave this world in a blast with a lot of innocent people, and thank God that's not going to happen. And next I thought about, oh, you know, maybe it's not so bad. I won't get to see them being released in some hostage exchange. And not even seeing them in a courthouse, that's quite difficult. I mean, I'm very proud of our judicial system, but okay, so that experience was saved from me. And then I started getting calls from journalists, and I figured I have to go tell the children. So I went upstairs and I woke them up, and I said, there was a battle in Hebron, and the murderers of Naftali, Eyal, and Gilad were killed. And then the kid said, yes! and then I realized sometimes it's just good to say that the bad guys lost. So that's it.
Okay, maybe,
The lady.
how much time do we have, Valerie? Okay, maybe 2 more questions and that's it.
Okay.
This means 2 more. If you had done this, 0. Claude.
Lighter note tonight, Eddie Wiesel has advertised that he's coming to Washington with Bibi Netanyahu. Half of these people are going to shoot me tonight, but Eddie Wiesel is coming. And what do you think should be the position of Israel to come? Should they come or not?
You have the ape. Okay. You have the APAC experts here in the audience. I'm just Naftali's mother. Okay.
Okay, Randy, 1 more question.
Thank you. So the truth is, I believe in anything good coming out of this, and I believe in grassroots initiatives. And even as far as, abducted and unity, I believe in grassroots initiatives where locally you turn to other Jews that don't look like you and don't think like you and might dress differently and think differently. I'm sorry. And so anything you do is good. We're involved with a few initiatives that we're doing directly in the memory of the boys, and the school that Makor Chaim is decided to go for a life and to build a new campus and to grow. So anything that you choose right is the right thing for us. I'll end with one story. In the eulogy, a couple of interesting things happened. One was that 2 very, very different people, Yair Lapid, he's a center person, but he's very, very secular, and Rav Dov Zinger, the headmaster, the Rosh Yeshiva of Makor Chaim, used exactly the same phrase. They were talking about how when there's a minute before you start praying, you say, I accept upon myself the mitzvah of loving my neighbor as myself. I don't know if my translation is right. And it came from 2 separate sides. And I was told there as a Hasidic story that someone was asking about that. He said, before you start praying, you should focus on the love of God. Why are you focusing on the love of your fellow Jews? And they said, think of a father. Before his children turn to him, what would really give him nachat? If they turn to him and say, oh, Father, we love you, or if they turn to each other and say, we love you, we're each brother, the children coming together. And Rav Dov there in the eulogy said, people are used to saying that where there are 2 Jews, there are 3 opinions. And I want you to remember, there are 2 Jews, 3 opinions, but 1 heart. And for me, I felt this heart. So I felt this heart. I felt it then. I feel it now from you, and I want to thank you so much.